Question 1. The review process indicates a need to clarify the documentation requirements for a new driver's license applicant in Wyoming. Which of the following actions best ensures compliance with Wyoming's legal framework for obtaining a driver's license? Option A. Consult the official Wyoming Department of Transportation, Y. Driver Services website, or contact them directly to obtain a definitive list of acceptable documents for proof of identity and legal presence, and ensure all submitted documents meet these specific requirements. Option B. Submit a combination of documents that seem reasonable, such as a school ID and a utility bill, without verifying if they are specifically listed as acceptable by YDOT. Option C. Use a general online search for driver's license requirements and submit documents that appear commonly accepted across various states. Option D. Rely on advice from a friend who recently obtained a driver's license in Wyoming, assuming their experience reflects current regulations. The correct answer is A. Consult the official Wyoming Department of Transportation, Y. Driver Services website, or contact them directly to obtain a definitive list of acceptable documents for proof of identity and legal presence, and ensure all submitted documents meet these specific requirements. Explanation. The review process indicates a potential gap in understanding the specific requirements for obtaining a Wyoming driver's license, particularly concerning the documentation needed for proof of identity and legal presence. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the applicant to navigate the bureaucratic process accurately to avoid delays or denial of their license application. Careful judgment is required to ensure all submitted documents meet the Wyoming Department of Transportation's Y. standards. The correct approach involves diligently reviewing the official YDOT Driver Services website or contacting them directly to obtain the most current and accurate list of acceptable documents for proof of identity and legal presence. This proactive step ensures that the applicant gathers the precise documentation required by Wyoming law, such as a certified birth certificate, a valid U.S. passport, or an original Social Security card, along with proof of Wyoming residency. This approach is correct because it directly adheres to the regulatory framework established by YDOT for driver's license issuance, minimizing the risk of application rejection due to insufficient or incorrect documentation. It demonstrates a commitment to following established procedures and respecting the legal requirements for obtaining a driver's license in Wyoming. An incorrect approach would be to rely on outdated information from a friend or a general online search that may not reflect current YDOT regulations. This is professionally unacceptable because it risks submitting documents that are no longer considered valid or sufficient under Wyoming law, leading to application denial and the need to reapply, causing unnecessary delays and frustration. Another incorrect approach is to assume that documents accepted in another state will automatically be accepted in Wyoming. This is a regulatory failure because each state has its own specific requirements for driver's license applications, and failing to verify Wyoming's specific rules is a direct contravention of the established legal framework. Finally, attempting to submit documents that are not explicitly listed as acceptable by YDOT, even if they seem similar to acceptable forms, is also professionally unacceptable, as it bypasses the established verification process and demonstrates a lack of diligence in adhering to the law. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes verification of official sources for all regulatory requirements. This involves actively seeking out the most current information directly from the governing body, YDOT in this case, and cross-referencing it with any provided guidance. When in doubt, direct communication with the relevant agency is always the most prudent course of action. Question 2. Performance analysis shows that during a Wyoming DMV driver's test, an applicant approaches an uncontrolled intersection at the same time as another vehicle. The other vehicle is approaching from the applicant's right. Based on Wyoming traffic law, what is the applicant's required action to demonstrate regulatory compliance? Option A. Yield the right-of-way to the vehicle approaching from the applicant's right. Option B. Proceed into the intersection, assuming the other vehicle will yield. Option C. Accelerate to enter the intersection before the other vehicle. Option D. Attempt to signal to the other driver to proceed first. The correct answer is A. Yield the right-of-way to the vehicle approaching from the applicant's right. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a driver to interpret and apply complex traffic laws in real time, under the pressure of a testing environment. The challenge lies in understanding the nuances of right-of-way rules, particularly when multiple vehicles are involved, and ensuring compliance with Wyoming's specific traffic statutes to demonstrate safe and lawful operation of a vehicle. Misinterpreting these rules can lead to dangerous situations and a failed test. Correct approach analysis. The best professional approach involves a thorough understanding of Wyoming Statute 31-5-1106, which governs right-of-way at intersection. This statute mandates that a driver approaching an intersection where traffic is not controlled by official traffic control devices, and where two vehicles enter the intersection at approximately the same time, must yield the right-of-way to the vehicle on the right. Therefore, the driver must recognize that the vehicle approaching from the right has the legal right-of-way and must wait for that vehicle to clear the intersection before proceeding. This approach prioritizes safety and strict adherence to Wyoming's traffic laws, which is the primary objective of the driver's license examination. Incorrect approaches analysis. Proceeding into the intersection without yielding to the vehicle on the right is a direct violation of Wyoming Statute 31-5-1106. This demonstrates a failure to understand or apply fundamental right-of-way rules, creating an immediate safety hazard and indicating the driver is not prepared for safe operation of a vehicle on Wyoming roadways. Assuming the other vehicle will stop because the driver believes they are proceeding more quickly is a dangerous assumption and not supported by Wyoming traffic law. The law is clear. The vehicle on the right has the right-of-way, regardless of perceived speed differences. This approach relies on guesswork rather than legal mandates. Attempting to signal to the other driver to proceed is also incorrect. While courtesy is important, it cannot override established traffic laws. The driver must yield according to the statute, and the other driver is not obligated to respond to a signal that attempts to alter the legal right-of-way. This approach introduces uncertainty and potential miscommunication. Professional reasoning. Professionals in driver testing and licensing must adhere strictly to the codified laws of Wyoming. The decision-making process for evaluating a driver's performance at an uncontrolled intersection hinges on their ability to correctly identify and apply the right-of-way rules as defined in Wyoming Statute 31-5-1106. A driver's test is not a forum for negotiation or assumption. It is a demonstration of knowledge and application of established traffic safety regulations. The examiner's role is to ensure the applicant can operate a vehicle safely and lawfully, which includes understanding and respecting the rights of other road users as dictated by law. Question 3. Compliance review shows that a driver's license examiner in Wyoming is preparing to administer a road test. To ensure adherence to Wyoming's specific traffic laws and safe driving standards, which of the following question types would be most appropriate for the examiner to incorporate into the pre-drive knowledge assessment portion of the test? Option A. Questions asking for the applicant's personal opinions on the most challenging driving conditions they anticipate encountering in Wyoming. Option B. Questions directly referencing Wyoming's specific speed limit regulation for different road types within the state, right-of-way rules at intersections as defined by Wyoming statutes, and procedures for yielding to emergency vehicles as outlined in the Wyoming Driver's Handbook. Option C. Questions about general vehicle maintenance checks that are not explicitly mandated by Wyoming law for basic vehicle operation. Option D. Questions based on common driving practices that may vary significantly from specific Wyoming traffic statutes. The correct answer is B. Questions directly referencing Wyoming's specific speed limit regulations for different road types within the state, right-of-way rules at intersections as defined by Wyoming statutes, and procedures for yielding to emergency vehicles as outlined in the Wyoming Driver's Handbook. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the applicant to demonstrate a thorough understanding of Wyoming's specific traffic laws and safe driving practices, not just general driving knowledge. The examiner must assess the applicant's ability to apply these rules in a real-world driving context, ensuring they pose no undue risk to themselves or others on Wyoming roadways. The challenge lies in distinguishing between rote memorization and genuine comprehension and application of the law. Correct approach analysis. The best approach involves the examiner strictly adhering to the official Wyoming Driver's Handbook and the established testing procedures for the state. This means asking questions that directly test knowledge of Wyoming-specific traffic laws, road signs, and safe driving techniques as outlined in the handbook. For example, questions about specific speed limits in different Wyoming zones, right-of-way rules at Wyoming intersections, or the proper procedure for interacting with Wyoming law enforcement during a traffic stop are crucial. This approach is correct because it ensures the assessment is fair, consistent, and directly aligned with the legal requirements for obtaining a Wyoming driver's license, as mandated by the Wyoming Department of Transportation, WYDOT. It prioritizes public safety by verifying the applicant's competence according to state standards. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach would be to ask questions based on general driving knowledge that might be common across many states, but not specifically codified or emphasized in Wyoming law. This fails to meet the jurisdictional requirement, as the test must be specific to Wyoming. For instance, asking about a generic defensive driving maneuver without tying it to a specific Wyoming scenario or law would be insufficient. Another incorrect approach would be to ask questions that are overly subjective or rely on personal opinions rather than established Wyoming traffic regulations. This undermines the objectivity of the test and does not accurately assess the applicant's knowledge of the law. For example, asking, "What do you think is the most dangerous road in Wyoming?" is not a valid test of driving competence. Finally, an incorrect approach would be to deviate from the official testing protocol by introducing elements not included in the Wyoming Driver's Handbook or WYDOT testing guidelines. This could include asking about vehicle maintenance, beyond what is legally required for operation or testing skills, not relevant to basic safe driving on Wyoming roads. This violates the principle of standardized testing and could lead to an unfair assessment. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this role should always consult and strictly follow the official regulatory documents and procedural manuals provided by the governing body, WYDOT in this case. When faced with ambiguity, they should seek clarification from supervisors or official training materials rather than improvising. The primary ethical obligation is to public safety, which is best served by a standardized, legally compliant assessment. Question 4. Investigation of a driver's license status in Wyoming reveals a prior suspension. The individual believes their license may be reinstated because a significant amount of time has passed since the suspension began and they have paid some, but not all, of the associated fines. What is the most appropriate and legally compliant course of action to determine if they can legally operate a motor vehicle in Wyoming? Option A. Contact the Wyoming Department of Transportation, DMVD, to obtain official confirmation of license status and all specific reinstatement requirements. Option B. Drive cautiously, believing that partial fine payment might be accepted for reinstatement. Option C. Rely on a friend's anecdotal experience of a similar situation being resolved without full reinstatement. Option D. Assume the license is reinstated because the suspension period has elapsed and some fines have been paid. The correct answer is A. Contact the Wyoming Department of Transportation, DMVD, to obtain official confirmation of license status and all specific reinstatement requirements. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an individual to navigate the complexities of Wyoming's motor vehicle laws concerning the operation of a vehicle with a suspended license. The core challenge lies in understanding the specific conditions under which a license suspension can be reinstated and the legal ramifications of driving without fulfilling those conditions. Misinterpreting these requirements can lead to severe legal penalties, including further license suspension, fines, and even criminal charges, impacting the individual's ability to legally operate a vehicle and potentially their employment. Careful judgment is required to ensure compliance with Wyoming statutes and administrative rules. Correct approach analysis. The best professional approach involves diligently verifying the exact requirements for license reinstatement with the Wyoming Department of Transportation, DMVD. This includes confirming the status of any outstanding fines, completion of required traffic safety courses, and submission of any necessary documentation. The correct approach is to obtain official confirmation from the DMVD that all conditions have been met, and the license is fully reinstated before attempting to drive. This aligns with Wyoming Statute Section 31-7-117, which outlines the procedures for license reinstatement and emphasizes that a license is not valid until all requirements are satisfied. Adhering to this official channel ensures legal compliance and avoids potential violations. Incorrect approaches analysis. Operating a vehicle based on a verbal assurance from a friend who claims to have seen a similar situation resolved without full reinstatement is professionally unacceptable. This approach disregards official channels and relies on hearsay, which is not legally binding. Violates Wyoming Statute Section 31-7-117 by failing to confirm official reinstatement status and exposes the individual to legal penalties. Driving with the belief that a license suspension has expired simply because a certain amount of time has passed is also professionally unacceptable. Wyoming law, as outlined in its statutes and administrative rules, typically requires active steps for reinstatement, not just the passage of time. This approach ignores the procedural requirements for regaining driving privileges and constitutes driving on a suspended license. Attempting to drive after paying only a portion of the outstanding fines, assuming this partial payment will be sufficient for reinstatement, is professionally unacceptable. Wyoming law generally requires full satisfaction of all financial obligations before a license can be reinstated. This approach fails to meet the complete requirements stipulated by the DMV and the relevant statutes, leading to a violation. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing similar situations should adopt a systematic approach. First, identify the specific regulatory body responsible for licensing, in this case, the Wyoming DMV. Second, consult the official statutes and administrative rules governing license suspensions and reinstatements in Wyoming. Third, directly contact the relevant agency to obtain clear, written confirmation of all requirements and the current status of the license. Fourth, ensure all conditions are demonstrably met and officially acknowledged before resuming any activity requiring the license. This methodical process prioritizes legal compliance and mitigates risk. Question 5. Comparative studies suggest that drivers often face urgent personal situations while operating a vehicle. If a driver in Wyoming receives an urgent text message from a family member while driving on Interstate 80 and needs to respond immediately, what is the most appropriate and legally compliant course of action according to Wyoming traffic laws? Option A. Stop the vehicle at the next traffic light or stop sign to read and respond to the text message. Option B. Use a hands-free device to dictate a response to the text message while keeping both hands on the steering wheel. Option C. Pull over to the nearest safe location off the roadway before reading and responding to the text message. Option D. Briefly glance at the text message and respond with a quick reply while continuing to drive, as it is a family emergency. The correct answer is C. Pull over to the nearest safe location off the roadway before reading and responding to the text message. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a driver to navigate a situation where their personal circumstances might conflict with strict adherence to traffic laws. The challenge lies in balancing the immediate need to assist a family member with the legal obligation to operate a vehicle safely, and in compliance with Wyoming's traffic regulations, particularly concerning the use of a mobile device while driving. A driver must make a split-second decision that prioritizes safety and legality over personal urgency. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves prioritizing safety and legal compliance above all else. This means pulling over to a safe location off the roadway before engaging with a mobile device, even for a brief, urgent communication. Wyoming Statute 31-5-126. 1 specifically addresses the use of electronic devices by drivers. This statute mandates that a driver may not use a handheld electronic device while operating a motor vehicle on a highway in Wyoming. While exceptions exist for emergencies, the primary directive is to avoid distraction. Therefore, stopping the vehicle to make or receive a call or text is the only legally compliant and safest method to address an urgent family matter. This approach directly adheres to the spirit and letter of Wyoming's distracted driving laws, which are designed to prevent accidents caused by driver inattention. Incorrect approach is analysis. Using a mobile device while the vehicle is in motion, even for a brief moment to check a message or make a quick call, constitutes a violation of Wyoming Statute 31-5-126. 1. This action directly contributes to distracted driving, a leading cause of traffic accidents. The law does not permit incidental or brief use of handheld devices while the vehicle is in motion, as any such use diverts the driver's attention from the primary task of operating the vehicle safely. Furthermore, attempting to use the device while stopped at a traffic light or stop sign without pulling over completely still presents a risk. The driver's attention is divided, and they may not react promptly to changing traffic conditions, such as a light turning green or another vehicle's movement. This failure to fully disengage from the device and focus on the driving environment is a regulatory and ethical lapse. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that consistently prioritizes safety and legal adherence. When faced with a situation that presents a potential conflict between personal needs and legal obligations, the professional approach is to first ensure compliance with regulations. This involves assessing the situation, identifying the relevant laws, in this case, Wyoming's distracted driving laws, and choosing the course of action that best upholds these laws and promotes safety. If a situation requires attention to a mobile device, the immediate action should be to find a safe place to stop the vehicle before engaging with the device. This proactive approach prevents potential violations and minimizes risk to oneself and others. Question 6. The investigation demonstrates that a Wyoming resident's vehicle has broken down, and they need to transport a sick family member to a medical facility urgently. The resident does not possess a valid Wyoming driver's license. Which course of action best adheres to Wyoming's regulatory framework for motor vehicle operation? Option A. Drive the vehicle to the medical facility, believing that law enforcement will be understanding given the emergency circumstances. Option B. Cease vehicle operation and arrange for alternative licensed transportation for the family member. Option C. Allow the family member to drive the vehicle, as they are familiar with the local roads and the situation is urgent. Option D. Operate the vehicle cautiously for a short distance to the nearest medical facility, as it is an emergency. The correct answer is B. Cease vehicle operation and arrange for alternative, licensed transportation for the family member. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a driver to navigate a situation where their personal circumstances directly conflict with the legal requirements for operating a motor vehicle in Wyoming. The driver's immediate need to transport a family member clashes with the legal obligation to possess a valid driver's license. Misjudging this situation could lead to serious legal consequences for the driver and potentially endanger others. Careful judgment is required to prioritize legal compliance while seeking safe and lawful alternatives. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves immediately ceasing operation of the vehicle and arranging for alternative transportation that does not involve an unlicensed driver. This approach is correct because Wyoming law, like all states, mandates that individuals must possess a valid driver's license to legally operate a motor vehicle on public roads. Continuing to drive without a license is a direct violation of Wyoming statutes Title 31, Chapter 7, which governs driver licensing. This approach prioritizes legal compliance and public safety by preventing an illegal act and avoiding potential harm. Incorrect approach is analysis. Operating the vehicle with the understanding that it is a temporary, emergency situation is professionally unacceptable. While the driver's intent may be compassionate, Wyoming law does not provide an emergency exception for driving without a license. This action directly violates Wyoming statutes Title 31, Chapter 7, and exposes the driver to penalties such as fines, license suspension, and potentially even vehicle impoundment. Allowing the family member to drive because they know the roads is also professionally unacceptable. Familiarity with local roads does not substitute for a legally issued driver's license. The licensing process in Wyoming is designed to ensure drivers have met specific competency and knowledge standards. Driving without this certification, regardless of familiarity, is a violation of Wyoming statutes Title 31, Chapter 7. Driving cautiously and only for a short distance to reach a specific destination is similarly unacceptable. The duration or perceived safety of the drive does not negate the fundamental legal requirement for a valid license. Wyoming law does not permit conditional or limited unlicensed driving. This approach still constitutes a violation of Wyoming statutes Title 31, Chapter 7. Professional reasoning. Professionals in any field, including driving, must operate within the established legal framework. When faced with a conflict between personal needs or perceived emergencies and legal requirements, The primary professional responsibility is to uphold the law. This involves understanding the relevant statutes, in this case, Wyoming Statutes Title 31, Chapter 7, recognizing the consequences of noncompliance and actively seeking lawful alternatives. The decision-making process should involve 1. Identifying the legal requirement. 2. Assessing the personal situation against the legal requirement. 3. Prioritizing legal compliance. 4. Exploring and implementing lawful alternatives. Question 7. Assessment of regulatory compliance in Wyoming. If a driver's license has expired yesterday and the individual needs to immediately transport a sick family member to a hospital across town, what is the most appropriate course of action according to Wyoming traffic laws and DMVD guidelines? Option A. Arrange for alternative transportation for the family member, such as a taxi, rideshare service, or asking another licensed individual to drive, and proceed to renew the driver's license as soon as possible. Option B. Assume that the expired license is still valid for a short grace period, especially in emergency situations, and drive to the hospital. Option C. Drive the vehicle to the hospital, explaining that the license is only a day expired and that the situation is an emergency. Option D. Borrow a vehicle from a friend and drive, as the personal vehicle's registration might be more critical than the driver's license status. The correct answer is A. Arrange for alternative transportation for the family member, such as a taxi, rideshare service, or asking another licensed individual to drive, and proceed to renew the driver's license as soon as possible. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a driver to navigate a situation where their personal circumstances directly conflict with the legal requirements for operating a motor vehicle in Wyoming. The driver's immediate need to transport a family member clashes with the legal obligation to possess a valid driver's license. The professional challenge lies in making a decision that prioritizes safety and legal compliance while acknowledging the urgency of the situation. Careful judgment is required to avoid actions that could lead to legal penalties and compromise public safety. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves recognizing the legal prohibition against driving without a valid license and making alternative arrangements for transportation. This aligns with Wyoming's traffic laws, which mandate that all individuals operating a motor vehicle on public roads must possess a valid driver's license issued by the state. The ethical imperative is to uphold the law and ensure public safety by not operating a vehicle illegally, even under duress. This approach prioritizes compliance with Wyoming Statute 31-7-101, which outlines the licensing requirements for drivers. Incorrect approaches analysis. Choosing to drive with an expired license, even with the intention of renewing it soon, is a direct violation of Wyoming traffic laws. This action demonstrates a disregard for legal requirements and poses a risk to public safety, as the driver's competency and qualifications have not been recently verified by the Wyoming Department of Transportation, DMVD. Suggesting that the expired license is still valid for a short grace period is factually incorrect and legally unsound. Wyoming law does not provide an automatic grace period for operating a vehicle with an expired license. Renewal must be completed before the expiration date to maintain legal driving privileges. Asking a friend to drive, while seemingly a solution, does not absolve the individual of responsibility if they are the owner of the vehicle and aware of the license status, and it does not address the immediate need for the individual to transport their family member if they are the only available driver. The core issue remains the inability of the individual to legally operate a vehicle. Professional reasoning. Professionals in situations involving potential legal or ethical conflicts should first identify the governing regulations and laws. In this case, the Wyoming traffic statutes regarding driver's licenses are paramount. The next step is to assess the immediate risk and consequences of various actions. Prioritizing legal compliance and public safety, even when faced with personal urgency, is a fundamental principle. If a legal or ethical barrier exists, the professional approach is to seek lawful alternatives rather than circumventing the rules. This involves understanding the spirit and letter of the law and making decisions that uphold both. Question 8. The audit findings indicate that a licensing agent in Wyoming encountered an applicant for a driver's license who presented a birth certificate and a utility bill, but lacked a social security card and proof of lawful presence in the United States. The agent is unsure how to proceed given the incomplete documentation. Which of the following actions best adheres to Wyoming's regulatory framework for driver's license issuance? Option A. Accept the birth certificate and utility bill as sufficient proof and proceed with issuing the driver's license, assuming the applicant is a legal resident. Option B. Inform the applicant that the provided documents are insufficient and provide a clear list of acceptable forms of identification and proof of lawful presence required by Wyoming law, advising them to return when they have all necessary documentation. Option C. Politely refuse service and ask the applicant to leave without explaining the specific documentation requirements, suggesting they research the requirements themselves. Option D. Issue a temporary driver's permit to the applicant, with a note to follow up on the missing documents within 30 days to allow them to begin driving while their application is processed. Correct answer is B. Inform the applicant that the provided documents are insufficient and provide a clear list of acceptable forms of identification and proof of lawful presence required by Wyoming law, advising them to return when they have all necessary documentation. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate need for a driver's license with the legal requirements for obtaining one in Wyoming. The applicant's eagerness to drive, coupled with their incomplete documentation, creates a situation where a licensing agent must strictly adhere to regulations to prevent fraudulent or illegal licensing, while also providing clear guidance to the applicant. Failure to do so could result in legal repercussions for the agent and the Department of Transportation, and potentially put unqualified drivers on the road. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves politely but firmly informing the applicant that they cannot proceed with the licensing process without the required proof of identity and lawful presence in Wyoming, as mandated by Wyoming Statutes Title 31, Chapter 7, specifically concerning driver's license issuance and requirements. The agent must clearly explain which documents are missing and provide the applicant with a list of acceptable forms of identification and proof of residency. This approach ensures compliance with state law, upholds the integrity of the licensing system, and educates the applicant on the necessary steps to legally obtain a driver's license. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to accept the applicant's word and issue a temporary permit, hoping they will provide the missing documents later. This violates Wyoming Statutes Title 31, Chapter 7, which requires verification of identity and lawful presence before issuing any license. It bypasses essential security and legal checks, potentially leading to the issuance of licenses to individuals not legally entitled to them. Another incorrect approach is to dismiss the applicant without providing any information on what is needed. While this avoids immediate noncompliance, it is unprofessional and unhelpful. It fails to guide the applicant toward a legal solution and could lead to frustration and repeated unsuccessful attempts, reflecting poorly on the Department of Transportation's customer service and commitment to public safety. A further incorrect approach is to accept clearly insufficient documentation, such as a utility bill with a different name or an expired foreign passport, without accompanying proof of legal status. This directly contravenes the spirit and letter of Wyoming's licensing laws, which are designed to ensure that only qualified and legally present individuals are granted driving privileges. Such an action constitutes a serious regulatory failure. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this role should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes legal compliance and public safety. This involves 1. Understanding and internalizing all relevant Wyoming statutes and departmental policies regarding driver's license issuance. 2. Clearly communicating requirements to applicants in a polite and informative manner. 3. Strictly adhering to documentation verification procedures. 4. Documenting all interactions and decisions accurately. 5. Seeking clarification from supervisors or legal counsel when faced with ambiguous situations. The goal is to facilitate the legal licensing process while rigorously upholding regulatory standards. Question 9. Regulatory review indicates that a Wyoming resident, aged 15, has successfully passed the written knowledge test and is now eligible for a learner's permit. To legally practice driving under this permit, what is the specific requirement regarding the accompanying licensed driver in the vehicle? Option A. The accompanying licensed driver can be any licensed driver, regardless of age, and must occupy the front passenger seat. Option B. The accompanying licensed driver must be at least 18 years old and can be in any seat in the vehicle. Option C. The accompanying licensed driver must be at least 16 years old and occupy the front passenger seat. Option D. The accompanying licensed driver must be at least 18 years old and occupy the front passenger seat. The correct answer is D. The accompanying licensed driver must be at least 18 years old and occupy the front passenger seat. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a Wyoming driver's license applicant by testing their understanding of the specific requirements for obtaining a learner's permit, particularly concerning the supervision clause. Navigating these regulations requires careful attention to detail to ensure compliance and avoid potential legal issues or delays in the licensing process. The challenge lies in correctly interpreting and applying the Wyoming Department of Transportation (WYDOT) rules regarding supervised driving practice. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves accurately recalling and applying the Wyoming statute that mandates a licensed driver aged 18 or older must be present in the front passenger seat when a permit holder is driving. This approach demonstrates a thorough understanding of the WYDOT regulatory framework for new drivers, ensuring the applicant is prepared to operate a vehicle legally and safely. Adhering to this specific requirement is crucial for permit validity and for fostering responsible driving habits from the outset, as mandated by Wyoming law. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves believing that any licensed driver, regardless of age, can supervise a permit holder. This fails to comply with Wyoming's specific age requirement for supervisors, potentially leading to the permit being invalidated or the driver facing penalties for operating without proper supervision as defined by state law. Another incorrect approach is assuming that a permit holder can drive alone if they have completed a driver's education course. While driver's education is beneficial, it does not exempt permit holders from the statutory supervision requirements in Wyoming. This misunderstanding overlooks the explicit legal mandate for supervision during the permit phase. A further incorrect approach is thinking that a permit holder can drive with a supervising driver who is under the age of 18. This directly contradicts Wyoming's statute, which specifies the minimum age for a supervising licensed driver. Failure to meet this age criterion means the supervision is not legally valid. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach such questions by first identifying the specific jurisdiction and the relevant regulatory body, in this case, Wyoming and WYDOT. They should then recall or consult the precise statutes and administrative rules governing the topic. When faced with multiple interpretations, the most conservative and legally compliant option, which directly aligns with the written regulations, should be chosen. This involves prioritizing adherence to the letter of the law over assumptions or common, but legally unsupported practices. Question 10. Consider a scenario where a Wyoming resident is purchasing a used 2018 SUV with an original manufacturer's suggested retail price, MSRP, of $35,000. The vehicle is being registered in Wyoming in late 2023, based on Wyoming's statutory framework for vehicle registration fees, which calculation method would accurately determine the registration fee. Option A. Use the registration fee calculation formula from the state of Montana, as it is a neighboring state with similar vehicle types. Option B. Calculate the registration fee based on 5% of the vehicle's current market value, which is estimated to be $22,000. Option C. Calculate the depreciated taxable value of the vehicle based on its age and original MSRP using Wyoming's official depreciation schedule. Then apply the corresponding tiered percentage rate for that age bracket as stipulated in Wyoming Statute Section 31-3-101. Option D. Apply a flat registration fee of $100, as this is a common fee for many used vehicles across different states. The correct answer is C. Calculate the depreciated taxable value of the vehicle based on its age and original MSRP using Wyoming's official depreciation schedule. Then apply the corresponding tiered percentage rate for that age bracket as stipulated in Wyoming Statute Section 31-3-101. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a precise understanding of Wyoming's specific vehicle registration fee structure, which is based on a tiered system tied to vehicle age and value. Miscalculating these fees can lead to significant financial discrepancies for the applicant and potential penalties for the dealership if incorrect amounts are remitted to the state. The professional must balance efficiency in processing with absolute accuracy to ensure compliance with Wyoming statutes. Correct approach analysis. The best approach involves accurately calculating the registration fee using Wyoming's statutory formula for used vehicles. This formula typically involves determining the vehicle's taxable value based on its age and original MSRP, then applying the appropriate tiered percentage rate as outlined in Wyoming Statute Section 31-3-101 and related sections. For 2018 vehicle with an original MSRP of $35,000, and assuming it falls into a specific age bracket e.g. 5 years old in 2023, the taxable value would be depreciated according to the state's schedule. If, for example, the depreciation schedule results in a taxable value of $20,000 and the applicable rate for a vehicle of that age is 4%, the fee would be \004 times $20,000 equals $800. This method directly adheres to the legal framework governing vehicle registration fees in Wyoming, ensuring the correct amount is collected and remitted. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach would be to apply a flat fee or a percentage based on the current market value without considering the specific depreciation schedule mandated by Wyoming law. This fails to comply with Wyoming Statute Section 31-3-101, which dictates the fee calculation based on the vehicle's age and original MSRP, not its current resale value. Another incorrect approach would be to use a registration fee calculation method from another state or a generic online calculator that does not reflect Wyoming's specific tiered rates and depreciation factors. This violates the principle of strict jurisdictional compliance, as Wyoming has its own distinct statutory requirements for calculating these fees. A third incorrect approach would be to estimate the fee based on past experience with similar vehicles without verifying the current year's rates or depreciation schedules. This introduces a high risk of error and noncompliance, as fee structures and depreciation factors can be updated by the Wyoming legislature. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this field must adopt a systematic approach. First, identify the specific jurisdiction, Wyoming. Second, consult the relevant statutes and administrative rules, Wyoming Statute Section 31-3-101 et sec., and any associated Department of Transportation regulations. Third, gather all necessary data points for the calculation, vehicle year, original MSRP, current date. Fourth, apply the statutory formula precisely, performing all necessary calculations, including depreciation. Finally, document the calculation process to ensure transparency and auditability. Question 11. Upon reviewing the conditions of a temporary driver's permit issued by the Wyoming Department of Transportation, a driver notices it specifies they can operate a standard passenger car, but not a truck exceeding 10,000 pounds gross vehicle weight. The driver needs to transport a large item that requires a pickup truck, which they know has a gross vehicle weight rating of 7,500 pounds. What is the most appropriate course of action for the driver to take to ensure compliance with Wyoming traffic laws? Option A. Drive the pickup truck and carry the temporary permit, believing the weight difference is minor enough not to be an issue. Option B. Drive the pickup truck, assuming the temporary permit covers all vehicles that are not explicitly prohibited. Option C. Drive the pickup truck, as its gross vehicle weight rating is below the 10,000 pound limit specified on the permit. Option D. Refrain from driving the pickup truck and explore alternative transportation methods for the item. The correct answer is C. Drive the pickup truck, as its gross vehicle weight rating is below the 10,000 pound limit specified on the permit. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a driver to navigate a situation where their personal circumstances might conflict with strict adherence to traffic laws. The driver must exercise sound judgment to balance their immediate need with the safety and legal requirements of operating a vehicle in Wyoming. The challenge lies in understanding the nuances of Wyoming's traffic laws regarding temporary permits and the responsibilities of a driver operating under such conditions. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves understanding and strictly adhering to the Wyoming Department of Transportation, WYDOT, regulations concerning temporary driver's permits. This means ensuring the permit is valid for the specific type of vehicle being driven, and that all conditions of the permit, such as passenger restrictions or time limitations, are met. The driver must also be prepared to present the permit and proof of insurance upon request by law enforcement. This approach is correct because it directly aligns with Wyoming Statute 31-7-116, which outlines the requirements for operating a vehicle with a learner's permit or temporary license, emphasizing compliance with all stipulated conditions and the necessity of carrying the permit. Incorrect approaches analysis. Operating a vehicle without ensuring the temporary permit is valid for the specific vehicle type is a regulatory failure. Wyoming law requires permits to be specific to the class of vehicle. Driving a vehicle not covered by the permit violates the terms of the permit and the spirit of safe driving regulations. Assuming a temporary permit is valid indefinitely without checking its expiration date is a significant regulatory failure. Wyoming statutes, like those in most jurisdictions, mandate that permits have a defined validity period. Operating beyond this period is equivalent to driving without a valid license. Ignoring any passenger restrictions or time limitations specified on the temporary permit constitutes a regulatory failure. These restrictions are in place for safety reasons, often related to the driver's experience level. Violating them undermines the purpose of the permit and is a direct contravention of WYDOT regulations. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach situations involving permits and licenses by prioritizing a thorough understanding of the governing regulations. This involves actively seeking out and reading the specific terms and conditions of any permit or license. When in doubt, consulting official sources like the WYDOT website or contacting the issuing authority is crucial. The decision-making process should always begin with a commitment to legal compliance and safety, followed by an assessment of personal circumstances against those legal requirements. If personal circumstances create a conflict, the professional approach is to find a legal and safe alternative, rather than to bend or break the rules. Question 12. When evaluating the proper procedure for navigating an intersection in Wyoming where the traffic signal has just turned yellow, what action best demonstrates compliance with traffic laws and safe driving practices? Option A. Accelerate to pass through the intersection before the light turns red. Option B. Slam on the brakes immediately upon seeing the yellow light, regardless of following traffic or proximity to the intersection. Option C. Continue through the intersection at the current speed without any change in behavior. Option D. Prepare to stop if it is safe to do so, or proceed through the intersection if already too close to stop safely. The correct answer is D. Prepare to stop if it is safe to do so, or proceed through the intersection if already too close to stop safely. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an applicant to demonstrate understanding of Wyoming's specific traffic laws regarding yielding the right-of-way, particularly at intersections with conflicting traffic signals. Misinterpreting or failing to apply these rules can lead to dangerous situations, accidents, and violations of Wyoming statutes. The challenge lies in applying the correct legal principle to a common driving situation. Correct approach analysis. The best professional approach involves understanding and applying Wyoming's traffic laws concerning yielding at intersections. Specifically, when a traffic signal turns yellow, drivers must exercise caution and prepare to stop if it is safe to do so. If a driver has already entered the intersection or is so close that stopping safely is impossible, they may proceed through the intersection. This aligns with the principle of safe driving and adherence to traffic control devices as mandated by Wyoming statutes, which prioritize avoiding collisions and obeying signals. Incorrect approaches analysis. Proceeding through the intersection at full speed when the light turns yellow is incorrect because it disregards the signal's warning to stop and the potential for cross-traffic to begin moving. This violates the duty to exercise caution and obey traffic signals, increasing the risk of a collision. Immediately slamming on the brakes when the light turns yellow, regardless of following traffic or the driver's position, is also incorrect. While stopping is the general rule, Wyoming law, like most jurisdictions, allows for safe passage if stopping abruptly would be dangerous. This approach prioritizes an overly rigid interpretation of the signal over situational safety. Attempting to speed up to beat the red light is fundamentally incorrect and dangerous. This action directly violates the intent of the yellow signal, which is a warning to stop, and significantly increases the likelihood of entering the intersection against a red light, a serious traffic violation. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach such scenarios by prioritizing safety and adherence to the specific traffic laws of Wyoming. This involves understanding the nuances of traffic signals, particularly the yellow light's purpose as a warning. The decision-making process should involve assessing the immediate surroundings, including following vehicles and the distance to the intersection, to determine the safest course of action that complies with Wyoming's traffic regulations. Question 13. The analysis reveals that while driving in Cheyenne, Wyoming, you approach an uncontrolled intersection at the same time as another vehicle. The other vehicle is to your right. According to Wyoming traffic law, what is the legally mandated action you must take to ensure regulatory compliance and traffic safety? Option A. Proceed into the intersection if you believe you can clear it before the other vehicle. Option B. Assess which vehicle is larger or appears to be moving faster and yield accordingly. Option C. Honk your horn to alert the other driver and proceed if they do not immediately yield. Option D. Yield the right-of-way to the vehicle on your right. The correct answer is D. Yield the right-of-way to the vehicle on your right. Explanation. The analysis reveals a scenario where a driver's understanding of Wyoming's traffic laws regarding yielding at intersections is being tested. This is professionally challenging because misinterpreting or failing to apply these laws can lead to dangerous situations, accidents, and legal repercussions. The core of the challenge lies in accurately assessing the right-of-way in a dynamic traffic environment, requiring not just knowledge of the rules, but also the ability to apply them under pressure. The best approach involves a thorough understanding and strict adherence to Wyoming Statute 31-5-117, which governs right-of-way at intersections. This statute mandates that drivers approaching an intersection must yield the right-of-way to any vehicle already within the intersection. Furthermore, when two vehicles approach an intersection simultaneously, the driver on the left must yield to the vehicle on the right. This approach is correct because it directly reflects the codified law, ensuring safe and predictable traffic flow and minimizing the risk of collisions. It prioritizes legal compliance and the safety of all road users. An incorrect approach would be to assume the right-of-way based on vehicle size or perceived speed. This is a regulatory failure because Wyoming law does not provide for such subjective assessments. It is ethically unsound as it introduces an element of personal judgment that can override established safety protocols, potentially endangering others. Another incorrect approach is to proceed into the intersection if there is a perceived gap in traffic, even if another vehicle is approaching from the right. This demonstrates a failure to understand or apply the vehicle on the right has the right-of-way rule when approaching simultaneously. This is a direct violation of Wyoming Statute 31-5-117 and creates a high risk of a T-bone collision. A final incorrect approach would be to prioritize personal convenience or speed over yielding. This is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. Wyoming traffic laws are designed for the safety of everyone, and personal convenience does not supersede the legal obligation to yield when required. This approach disregards the potential for severe consequences. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of the relevant Wyoming traffic statutes. When faced with an intersection scenario, the first step is to identify all approaching vehicles and their positions relative to the intersection. Then, apply the specific rules of right-of-way as defined by Wyoming law, prioritizing the safety of all parties involved. If there is any doubt about who has the right-of-way, the safest and legally compliant action is to yield. Question 14. Risk assessment procedures indicate that a driver approaching a marked crosswalk in Cheyenne, Wyoming, observes a pedestrian at the curb looking at their phone but appearing to be preparing to step into the crosswalk. The driver is concerned the pedestrian might not be fully aware of their surroundings. What is the most appropriate and legally compliant action for the driver to take? Option A. Honk the horn to alert the pedestrian to the approaching vehicle. Option B. Accelerate slightly to pass through the crosswalk before the pedestrian has a chance to enter it. Option C. Proceed through the crosswalk at a reduced speed, assuming the pedestrian will wait for them to pass. Option D. Slow down and be prepared to stop, yielding the right-of-way to the pedestrian if they enter the crosswalk. The correct answer is D. Slow down and be prepared to stop, yielding the right-of-way to the pedestrian if they enter the crosswalk. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a driver to interpret and apply a specific traffic law in a dynamic, real-world situation. The challenge lies in accurately recalling the nuances of Wyoming's traffic laws regarding yielding to pedestrians in crosswalks, especially when faced with potential ambiguity or conflicting visual cues. A driver's judgment directly impacts the safety of vulnerable road users and their own legal standing. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves recognizing the pedestrian's presence in the crosswalk and yielding the right-of-way. Wyoming Statute 31-5-1106 mandates that drivers approaching a crosswalk where a pedestrian is present or about to step into the crosswalk must exercise due care to avoid colliding with the pedestrian, giving them the right-of-way. The statute prioritizes pedestrian safety and establishes a clear legal obligation for drivers to yield. Acting in accordance with this statute demonstrates regulatory compliance and ethical responsibility towards pedestrian safety. Incorrect approaches analysis. Failing to yield to the pedestrian in the crosswalk, even if the driver believes the pedestrian might be distracted or moving slowly, is a direct violation of Wyoming Statute 31-5-1106. This approach disregards the law's clear mandate to yield when a pedestrian is present or about to enter the crosswalk, creating a significant safety hazard and legal liability. Proceeding through the crosswalk with the intention of the pedestrian hurrying up is also a violation, as it places the onus on the pedestrian to adapt to the driver's impatience rather than the driver fulfilling their legal duty to yield. Assuming the pedestrian will stop or wait without concrete evidence is a dangerous assumption that contravenes the protective intent of the law. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach such situations by prioritizing safety and adhering strictly to traffic laws. A driver's primary responsibility is to operate their vehicle in a manner that protects themselves and others. This involves a proactive approach to identifying potential hazards, such as pedestrians in or near crosswalks, and applying the relevant traffic laws without subjective interpretation or personal judgment about the pedestrian's behavior. When in doubt, the safest and legally compliant action is always to yield. Question 15. Implementation of safe driving practices is critical for all licensed drivers in Wyoming. During the practical driving skills test in Cheyenne, a new driver approaches an uncontrolled intersection where another vehicle is approaching simultaneously from the cross street. What is the most appropriate action for the driver to take to demonstrate compliance with Wyoming traffic laws and safe driving principles? Option A. Assume the other vehicle will yield because it is larger. Option B. Proceed first because the other vehicle appears to be slowing down. Option C. Yield to the vehicle on the right, as per Wyoming Statute 31-5-116. Option D. Stop completely in the intersection to allow the other vehicle to pass. The correct answer is C. Yield to the vehicle on the right, as per Wyoming Statute 31-5-116. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a new driver in Wyoming who has just passed their written knowledge test and is now facing the practical driving skills test. The challenge lies in accurately recalling and applying the specific rules of the road and safe driving practices mandated by Wyoming's Department of Transportation, WYDOT, regulations, particularly concerning right-of-way at intersections, which is a common area for errors. The driver must demonstrate not only proficiency in operating a vehicle, but also a thorough understanding and adherence to the legal framework governing road usage in Wyoming. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves the driver demonstrating a clear understanding of the fundamental principles of right-of-way, as outlined in the Wyoming Driver's Manual and WYDOT regulations. This means yielding to traffic already in the intersection or to vehicles that arrive at the intersection before you, and in the case of two vehicles arriving simultaneously at an uncontrolled intersection, yielding to the vehicle on the right. This approach is correct because it directly aligns with Wyoming Statute 31-5-116, which governs right-of-way at intersections, and is a core component of safe and legal driving. Adhering to these established rules minimizes the risk of collisions and ensures predictable traffic flow, which are paramount safety objectives enforced by WYDOT. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to assume that the vehicle that is larger or appears to be moving faster has the right-of-way. This is a dangerous assumption that directly violates Wyoming's right-of-way laws. There is no provision in Wyoming traffic law that grants right-of-way based on vehicle size or perceived speed. This approach demonstrates a fundamental misunderstanding of traffic control principles and creates a significant risk of an accident, which would be a failure to comply with WYDOT safety standards. Another incorrect approach is to proceed into the intersection without hesitation if no other vehicles are immediately visible, even if another vehicle is approaching from a cross street. Wyoming law requires drivers to exercise caution and yield when necessary, even if the intersection appears clear at first glance. This approach fails to account for potential hazards and demonstrates a lack of defensive driving, which is an implicit expectation of safe operation under WYDOT guidelines. A third incorrect approach is to stop completely in the middle of the intersection to assess the situation, even after yielding. While caution is important, stopping unnecessarily within an intersection can obstruct traffic flow and create confusion for other drivers, potentially leading to hazardous situations. Wyoming traffic laws emphasize smooth and predictable movement through intersections when it is safe to do so, and this approach deviates from that principle. Professional reasoning. Professionals, in this case, new drivers undergoing their skills test, should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes adherence to established legal statutes and safe driving practices. This involves thoroughly studying the official Wyoming driver's manual, understanding the rationale behind each rule, e.g., preventing collisions, ensuring order, and practicing these principles in real-world driving scenarios under supervision. When faced with an intersection, the driver should first identify all potential traffic sources, recall the specific right-of-way rules applicable to that intersection type, controlled or uncontrolled, and then execute the maneuver with deliberate caution, ensuring they are yielding when required by Wyoming law. This systematic approach ensures compliance and promotes safety. Question 16. To address the challenge of a candidate exhibiting clear signs of potential impairment during a road test on the highways of Wyoming, what is the most appropriate and legally compliant course of action for a Wyoming Department of Transportation, WYDOT driver license examiner? Option A. Immediately and safely terminate the road test, secure the vehicle, and report the observed behavior to the appropriate supervisor and potentially law enforcement according to WYDOT policy and Wyoming statutes. Option B. Continue the road test, making detailed notes of the observed behavior, and fail the candidate for general driving errors if they occur, without mentioning the suspected impairment. Option C. Fail the candidate immediately for suspected impairment, without initiating any formal reporting procedures to supervisors or law enforcement, and provide no further explanation beyond unfit to drive. Option D. Pass the candidate if they complete the remaining portions of the test without a major driving infraction, assuming the observed behavior was minor and not directly related to driving ability. The correct answer is A. Immediately and safely terminate the road test, secure the vehicle, and report the observed behavior to the appropriate supervisor and potentially law enforcement according to WYDOT policy and Wyoming statutes. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a Wyoming DMV driver license examiner who has observed a candidate exhibiting signs of potential impairment during the road test. The examiner must balance the immediate need to ensure public safety on Wyoming roadways with the candidate's right to a fair assessment and the procedural requirements of the Wyoming Department of Transportation, WYDOT, Driver Services Program. Failure to act appropriately could result in an unsafe driver being licensed or an individual being unfairly denied a license. Careful judgment is required to navigate these competing priorities within the established legal and procedural framework. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves immediately and safely terminating the road test and reporting the observed behavior to the appropriate supervisor and potentially law enforcement, as per Wyoming statutes and WYDOT policy regarding driver competency and public safety. This approach prioritizes the safety of the examiner and the public by preventing a potentially impaired individual from operating a vehicle. It also adheres to the procedural mandate of WYDOT to ensure all licensed drivers meet the required standards of physical and mental fitness to drive safely on Wyoming roads. This immediate action is crucial because the risk of an accident is present throughout the test. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to continue the road test while making notes of the observed behavior, hoping the candidate will improve or that the behavior is not severe enough to warrant immediate intervention. This fails to address the immediate safety risk posed by a potentially impaired driver. Wyoming law and WYDOT regulations emphasize proactive measures to prevent unsafe driving, and continuing the test under these circumstances would be a dereliction of the examiner's duty to public safety. Another incorrect approach is to fail the candidate solely based on the observed behavior without following the established protocol for reporting suspected impairment. While the candidate may indeed be unfit to drive, the process for addressing suspected impairment requires specific reporting and investigation steps. Failing to report the suspected impairment to supervisors or law enforcement bypasses crucial procedural safeguards and could lead to a challenge of the failure based on improper procedure, potentially allowing an unsafe driver to proceed without proper evaluation. A further incorrect approach is to ignore the observed behavior entirely and pass the candidate, assuming it is not the examiner's role to assess impairment. This is a grave ethical and regulatory failure. The examiner's role explicitly includes assessing the candidate's ability to operate a vehicle safely, which encompasses physical and mental faculties. Wyoming statutes and WYDOT guidelines empower examiners to take action when they have reasonable cause to believe a driver is unfit to operate a vehicle, and ignoring such signs directly contradicts this mandate and jeopardizes public safety. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this situation should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes safety and procedural adherence. First, assess the immediate safety of the situation. If there is any doubt about the candidate's ability to operate a vehicle safely due to suspected impairment, the test must be terminated immediately and safely. Second, consult relevant regulations and departmental policies. In Wyoming, this would involve understanding WYDOT procedures for handling suspected driver impairment and the legal framework surrounding driver licensing. Third, follow established reporting protocols. This typically involves informing a supervisor and, if warranted by the severity of the observed behavior, contacting law enforcement. Documenting all observations and actions taken is critical for accountability and legal protection. This systematic approach ensures that both public safety and procedural fairness are upheld. Question 17. Examination of the data shows that during a Wyoming driver's license road test, an applicant is instructed to change lanes on a multi-lane road. Which of the following examiner actions best reflects the process optimization for assessing safe lane change execution according to Wyoming DMV standards? Option A. The examiner notes the applicant's speed, penalizing them for driving 5 mph below the posted limit even if the lane change is otherwise safe. Option B. The examiner allows the lane change to proceed without comment, even if the applicant fails to use their turn signal. Option C. The examiner observes the applicant checking mirrors, signaling their intention and ensuring the target lane is clear before smoothly merging. Option D. The examiner permits the applicant to move into the new lane without confirming it is clear of other traffic. The correct answer is C. The examiner observes the applicant checking mirrors, signaling their intention and ensuring the target lane is clear before smoothly merging. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an applicant to demonstrate not only knowledge of Wyoming traffic laws, but also the ability to apply them in a practical, real-world driving context. The examiner must assess the applicant's judgment and adherence to safety protocols, which are paramount for public safety on Wyoming roadways. The challenge lies in distinguishing between minor errors and significant safety violations that would disqualify an applicant. Correct approach analysis. The best approach involves the examiner observing the applicant's ability to safely and legally execute a standard lane change maneuver, including checking mirrors, signaling, and ensuring a clear path before moving. This aligns with Wyoming's driver manual and the practical assessment of driving competency. The examiner must ensure the applicant demonstrates a clear understanding and application of safe lane change procedures as outlined by Wyoming statutes and DMV guidelines, prioritizing safety and adherence to traffic control devices. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach would be for the examiner to focus solely on the applicant's speed, penalizing them for driving slightly below the posted speed limit if they are doing so safely and cautiously. This fails to assess the core competency of a safe lane change and may penalize a prudent driver. Another incorrect approach would be for the examiner to overlook a failure to signal the lane change. This is a direct violation of Wyoming traffic laws and a critical safety lapse, as it fails to communicate the driver's intentions to other road users, increasing the risk of an accident. A further incorrect approach would be for the examiner to allow the applicant to drift into the new lane without ensuring it is clear. This demonstrates a lack of situational awareness and a disregard for the safety of other vehicles, which is a fundamental failure in driving competency. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach such assessments with a clear understanding of the Wyoming Driver Manual and applicable traffic laws. The decision-making process should prioritize safety above all else. Examiners must use a standardized checklist that focuses on observable behaviors directly related to safe driving practices and legal compliance. They should differentiate between minor hesitations and significant safety risks, ensuring that the assessment is fair, objective, and consistently applied to all applicants. The goal is to ensure that only competent and safe drivers are licensed to operate vehicles on Wyoming's roads. Question 18. Research into safe driving practices in Wyoming indicates that drivers must be prepared for various traffic control scenarios. Imagine you are taking your Wyoming driver's license test and approach an intersection controlled by a flashing red traffic signal. You observe that there are no other vehicles immediately visible in any direction. What is the most appropriate and legally compliant action to take? Option A. Remain stopped at the intersection indefinitely until absolutely certain no other vehicle will appear. Option B. Proceed through the intersection without stopping, assuming it is clear based on your observation. Option C. Come to a complete stop, then proceed only when it is safe to do so, yielding to any traffic already in the intersection or approaching it. Option D. Treat the flashing red light as a yield sign and proceed cautiously if no other vehicles are present. The correct answer is C. Come to a complete stop, then proceed only when it is safe to do so, yielding to any traffic already in the intersection or approaching it. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a driver to interpret and apply complex traffic laws in a dynamic, real-world situation. The driver must not only understand the rules, but also anticipate the actions of other road users and make split-second decisions that prioritize safety and legal compliance. The pressure of the test environment can exacerbate these challenges, demanding a calm and reasoned approach. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a systematic and defensive driving approach. This means actively scanning the environment, anticipating potential hazards, and maintaining a safe following distance. Specifically, when approaching an intersection with a flashing red light, the driver must treat it as a stop sign, coming to a complete stop before proceeding only when it is safe to do so and yielding to any traffic already in the intersection or approaching it. This aligns with Wyoming Statute 31-5-117, which mandates that drivers facing a flashing red signal shall stop and proceed only when it is safe. This approach prioritizes safety and adherence to traffic control devices, which is the fundamental ethical and legal obligation of any driver, especially during a licensing test. Incorrect approaches analysis. Treating a flashing red light as a yield sign is a significant regulatory failure. Wyoming Statute 31-5-117 clearly states that a flashing red signal is equivalent to a stop sign. Failing to come to a complete stop violates this statute and demonstrates a lack of understanding of fundamental traffic control device interpretation, posing a direct safety risk. Proceeding through the intersection without stopping, assuming no other vehicles are present, is also a critical regulatory and ethical failure. This demonstrates a disregard for traffic control devices and a failure to yield the right-of-way, which is a direct violation of traffic laws and a dangerous practice that could lead to an accident. It shows a lack of defensive driving principles. Hesitating indefinitely at the intersection without making a safe decision to proceed is also an incorrect approach, though less immediately dangerous than the others. While caution is important, prolonged hesitation can disrupt traffic flow and create confusion for other drivers. The driver must assess the situation and proceed when it is safe, rather than becoming paralyzed by indecision. This indicates a lack of confidence and preparedness, which are essential for safe driving. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach such situations by prioritizing safety and legal compliance above all else. This involves a thorough understanding of traffic laws, active scanning of the driving environment, and the application of defensive driving techniques. When faced with uncertainty or complex situations, the decision-making process should involve 1. Identifying the traffic control device and its meaning according to Wyoming law. 2. Assessing the surrounding traffic and potential hazards. 3. Making a decision that ensures safety and adheres to legal requirements. 4. Executing the maneuver smoothly and confidently. Question 19. Which approach would be most effective in ensuring compliance with Wyoming's driver's license issuance regulations, while also striving for operational efficiency at a county licensing office? Option A. Expediting the issuance of licenses by accepting applicants' self-declarations for residency and identity verification, provided they complete the written and vision tests. Option B. Prioritizing the processing of the highest number of applications per hour, allowing for minimal review of submitted documentation, and relying on the applicant's word for most requirements. Option C. Delegating the final approval of all license applications to junior staff members who are trained to quickly process paperwork, with senior staff only intervening for complex cases. Option D. Implementing a multi-stage verification process that confirms identity, residency, legal presence, and successful completion of all required written, vision, and road tests, with clear protocols for each stage. The correct answer is D. Implementing a multi-stage verification process that confirms identity, residency, legal presence, and successful completion of all required written, vision, and road tests, with clear protocols for each stage. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate need for efficient processing of driver's license applications with the absolute imperative of adhering to Wyoming's specific licensing laws and regulations. A rushed or incomplete process, even with good intentions, can lead to individuals operating vehicles without proper authorization, posing a significant public safety risk and violating state statutes. The pressure to reduce wait times must not compromise the integrity of the licensing system. Correct approach analysis. The approach that represents best professional practice involves a systematic, multi-stage verification process that aligns directly with Wyoming's statutory requirements for driver's license issuance. This includes verifying identity, residency, legal presence, and successful completion of all required testing, written, vision, and road. This method ensures that every applicant meets the legal criteria established by the Wyoming Department of Transportation, WYDOT, for safe and lawful operation of a motor vehicle, thereby upholding public safety and regulatory compliance. This approach prioritizes accuracy and adherence to law over speed. Incorrect approach is analysis, an approach that bypasses or shortcuts the required documentation review and testing phases, focusing solely on expediting the applicant's departure, is fundamentally flawed. This directly violates Wyoming statutes that mandate specific proof of identity, residency, and successful completion of examinations before a license can be issued. Such an approach creates a significant risk of issuing licenses to unqualified or unauthorized individuals, undermining public safety and the legal framework of driver licensing in Wyoming. An approach that relies on the applicant's verbal assurance of meeting requirements without independent verification of documents or test results is also unacceptable. Wyoming law requires documentary evidence for key aspects of licensing. This method fails to meet these statutory obligations and opens the door to fraudulent applications and the issuance of licenses to individuals who do not legally qualify, thereby compromising the integrity of the licensing system and public safety. An approach that prioritizes processing a high volume of applications by delegating critical verification steps to untrained or inadequately supervised personnel without robust oversight is problematic. While delegation can be a tool for efficiency, Wyoming's driver licensing regulations place the ultimate responsibility for accurate issuance on the licensing authority. Inadequate training and oversight can lead to errors, omissions, and noncompliance with specific statutory requirements, potentially resulting in the improper issuance of licenses and a failure to uphold public safety standards. Professional reasoning. Professionals in driver licensing roles must adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes legal compliance and public safety above all else. This involves understanding and strictly adhering to the specific statutes and regulations of Wyoming governing driver licensing. When faced with pressures to increase efficiency, the focus should be on optimizing existing processes within the legal framework, rather than compromising on essential verification steps. This requires a commitment to thoroughness, accuracy, and continuous training to ensure all staff are equipped to meet the state's legal requirements. Question 20. Benchmark analysis indicates that a Wyoming-based trucking company is preparing to transport a load of specialized machinery. The truck configuration consists of a steer axle, 2 tandem drive axles, and a tandem trailer axle. The maximum gross vehicle weight allowed in Wyoming is 80,000 pounds. Each tandem axle group, drive axles or trailer axles, has a maximum allowable weight of 34,000 pounds, and the steer axle has a maximum allowable weight of 20,000 pounds. The empty weight of the tractor is 18,000 pounds, and the empty weight of the trailer is 12,000 pounds. The total weight of the machinery to be loaded is 45,000 pounds. If the machinery is loaded such that the weight is distributed equally across the 2 drive axles and the 2 trailer axles, what is the total weight on the steer axle, the total weight on the drive axles, and the total weight on the trailer axles? Option A. Steer axle, 20,000 pounds, drive axles, 34,000 pounds, trailer axles, 32,000 pounds. Option B. Steer axle, 20,000 pounds, drive axles, 32,000 pounds, trailer axles, 32,000 pounds. Option C. Steer axle, 18,000 pounds, drive axles, 30,000 pounds, trailer axles, 32,000 pounds. Option D. Steer axle, 20,000 pounds, drive axles, 34,000 pounds, trailer axles, 34,000 pounds. The correct answer is D. Steer axle, 20,000 pounds, drive axles, 34,000 pounds, trailer axles, 34,000 pounds. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge for fleet managers in Wyoming, requiring them to balance operational efficiency with strict adherence to Wyoming Department of Transportation (WYDOT) regulations regarding vehicle weight limits. Exceeding these limits can result in significant fines, vehicle impoundment, and potential damage to infrastructure, all of which have substantial financial and operational repercussions. Accurate calculation of load distribution is paramount to avoid these penalties and ensure driver safety. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves calculating the total weight of the cargo and then determining the axle weight distribution based on the specific vehicle's axle configuration and the maximum allowable weight per axle as defined by Wyoming statutes. This method ensures that the vehicle remains within legal limits for each axle, which is the primary concern for WYDOT enforcement. For example, if a truck has a gross vehicle weight limit of 80,000 pounds and a maximum tandem axle weight of 34,000 pounds, the manager must ensure that the weight distributed across any 2 consecutive axles does not exceed 34,000 pounds, and that the total weight does not exceed 80,000 pounds. This proactive calculation prevents violations before they occur. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach is to solely focus on the gross vehicle weight, GVW, without considering individual axle weights. While the GVW is a critical limit, WYDOT regulations also impose strict limits on individual axle weights and tandem axle group weights. A truck could be under its GVW, but still be in violation if one or more axles are overloaded. This approach fails to account for the detailed weight distribution requirements mandated by Wyoming law. Another incorrect approach is to rely on the vehicle's rated capacity without verifying actual load distribution. Vehicle manufacturers provide ratings, but these do not always account for the specific load configurations or the dynamic weight shifts that can occur during transport. WYDOT enforcement officers measure actual axle weights, not theoretical capacities. This approach is insufficient as it does not address the real-world application of weight limits. A further incorrect approach is to assume that if the cargo fits within the trailer, it is legally distributed. The physical space occupied by cargo does not directly correlate to its weight distribution across the axles. Heavy items placed at the rear of a trailer can overload the drive axles, while items placed too far forward can overload the steering axle, even if the total weight is within limits and the cargo fits. This method ignores the fundamental principles of weight distribution and axle load enforcement. Professional reasoning. Professionals in fleet management must adopt a systematic approach to weight compliance. This involves understanding the specific weight regulations for Wyoming, including gross vehicle weight, axle weight limits, and tandem axle group limits. Before dispatching a vehicle, a detailed calculation should be performed, considering the weight of the tractor, trailer, and cargo, and how this weight is distributed across all axles. Utilizing load scales or consulting with experienced logistics personnel for accurate weight distribution estimates is crucial. This proactive, data-driven approach minimizes risk and ensures compliance with WYDOT regulations.